working 3 exhausting jobs just to keep a roof over my head. Meanwhile, my older sister lived in a luxury penthouse, driving a brand new Mercedes and claiming she made her fortune through crypto investments. I never questioned her success until last night at our grandfather's annual Thanksgiving dinner. Grandpa, a self-made billionaire, leaned across the mahogany table, smiled warmly, and asked me, "So, how is that $7,000 monthly check treating you? I hope it's helping with your medical bills." The entire room froze. I nearly choked on my water, staring at him in absolute shock because I had never received a single dime. When I pulled up my bank records right there at the table, my grandfather's lawyer turned pale. Every single check had been intercepted and cashed by my own sister. But that was just the beginning of the trap. My name is Sarah, and at 27 years old, I was drowning. Driving through the rain to my cramped, drafty apartment in Seattle, my daily existence had become a brutal endurance test. I was working 3 separate jobs, juggling retail shifts, waitressing until midnight, and doing freelance data entry in the early morning hours, just to barely cover my basic living expenses, student loans, and a mountain of unexpected medical debt. I was constantly exhausted, watching every single penny, and genuinely wondering how much longer I could keep my head above water. Meanwhile, my older sister, Kathy, was living like royalty. 3 years ago, she suddenly moved into a stunning luxury penthouse downtown and bought a brand new Mercedes. Whenever I asked how she afforded it, she would just smirk, wave her manicured hand, and claim she had struck it rich through early crypto investments. I never truly questioned her success. I just assumed she got lucky while I got left behind. That all changed last night at our grandfather Winston's annual Thanksgiving dinner. Grandpa Winston, a self-made billionaire, was a man who rarely spoke without intention. Halfway through the main course, he set down his wine glass, looked directly across the long mahogany table at me, and smiled warmly. "So, Sarah," he said, his voice echoing in the quiet room, "how is that $7,000 monthly check treating you? I hope it's been helping ease the burden of those medical bills." I nearly choked on my water, staring at him in absolute, paralyzed shock. "Grandpa, what are you talking about?" I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I've never received a single dime from you." The entire room froze instantly. The clinking of silverware died completely. I immediately pulled up my phone, logging into my banking app right there at the dinner table to show him my empty accounts and years of stagnant records. The moment I turned the screen toward him, my grandfather's personal lawyer, who was sitting nearby, turned deathly pale. Kathy's face instantly drained of all color. Her eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal, her previous arrogant posture completely collapsing into pure, unadulterated terror. Before she could even utter a fake excuse, Grandpa Winston's face hardened into stone. He slammed his fist on the table, looked at his legal team, and demanded they pull up the tracking data and digital signatures for those checks immediately. The trap had just been sprung. The silence in the dining room was heavy, broken only by the aggressive clicking of keys as Grandpa Winston's personal accountant opened his laptop right there at the table. I sat completely frozen, my eyes darting between the glowing screen and Kathy, who was now hyperventilating, her fingers clawing at the edge of her napkin. Winston's head of security stood right behind her, a silent, imposing guard ensuring she couldn't slip away. Within 90 seconds, the accountant turned the laptop toward my grandfather, the blue light reflecting off Winston's deeply lined, furious face. "It's just as we thought, sir," the accountant said quietly, his voice cutting through the suffocating tension. A private account was opened in Sarah's name exactly 3 years ago, using her stolen identity documents, social security number, and birth certificate. Every single month, your automated corporate check for $7,000 was deposited into this account. And within minutes of each deposit, the entire balance was electronically transferred directly into Kathy's personal checking account. I stared at the financial charts on the screen, a wave of profound nausea washing over me. The very sister who had watched me break my back working night shifts, the sister who smirked while I counted pennies for groceries, had been systematic in her theft. Kathy suddenly let out a high-pitched, nervous laugh, attempting to wave her hand dismissively. "Grandpa, please, this is just a massive family misunderstanding. I was only holding the money to build a secure fund for Sarah's future. You know how irresponsible she can be with finances." Silence. Winston roared, the sheer power of his voice causing the crystal glasses to rattle. The cold, unyielding fury radiating from my billionaire grandfather completely crushed her pathetic lie. He leaned forward, his steel eyes locking onto my trembling sister. "You have exactly 24 hours to return every single dollar you stole from your sister, Kathy. If that money is not back in a legitimate account for Sarah by tomorrow night, my legal team will hand this identity theft and wire fraud documentation directly to federal prosecutors. You will face immediate, total legal ruin." I returned to my cramped apartment that night, my mind spinning in a chaotic blur of shock and profound exhaustion. I sat on the edge of my worn-out mattress, staring blankly at the peeling wallpaper, trying to reconcile the image of the sister I grew up with against the calculating criminal who had systematically bled my life dry. How could someone sharing my own blood watch me suffer so deeply while living in absolute luxury off my stolen survival fund? Just past midnight, the sudden, harsh buzzing of my phone shattered the heavy silence. I glanced down at the screen. It was Kathy. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the glass before I finally swiped to answer, bracing myself for her typical venom. But she wasn't calling to throw insults or even to offer a desperate apology. Instead, her voice was completely frantic, filled with breathless, ragged gasps as she sobbed hysterically into the receiver. "Sarah, you have to listen to me," she panicked, dropping a massive plot twist that instantly made my blood run cold. I didn't act alone. I never would have thought of this by myself. My grip tightened around the phone as Kathy frantically confessed that she was merely a pawn. The true mastermind behind the entire 3-year scheme was our own mother, Eleanor. Eleanor had been the one who secretly raided my childhood bedroom to steal my social security number, passport, and birth certificate. She was the one who meticulously set up the fraudulent account, convincing Kathy that Grandpa Winston was dangerously unstable, playing cruel favorites, and that diverting the monthly corporate checks was the only logical way to balance the scales within our family dynamic. Kathy begged me to stay quiet, weeping that exposing the full truth to Winston would inevitably send Eleanor straight to a federal prison. The next morning, my feet felt like lead as I walked up the driveway to Eleanor's pristine suburban home. I didn't bother knocking. I used my spare key, stepping into the quiet house with a heart full of dread and anger. I found her in the kitchen, casually sipping coffee as if her world wasn't on the verge of collapsing. The moment I confronted her directly about the identity theft and the emotional and financial abuse of the last 3 years, her expression didn't soften with regret. Instead, her face hardened into a mask of chilling coldness. She set her coffee mug down with a sharp clink and looked at me without a shred of remorse. "Oh, stop acting like a victim, Sarah," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You were always Winston's absolute favorite, and everyone knew it. You didn't need the extra financial help, while Kathy desperately needed to maintain a certain high social status if she was ever going to marry into real wealth. I simply balanced the family scales." I stared at her, completely shattered to realize that my own mother had viewed my suffering as completely disposable. But she wasn't finished. She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she delivered a calculated threat. "If you dare go to the police, or if you tell Winston another word about my involvement in this, I will personally ensure the entire extended family turns their backs on you completely. I will ruin your reputation, and you will be completely alone." In that horrific moment, the last lingering illusion of maternal love was permanently erased. I finally realized that Eleanor and Kathy had been systematically gaslighting me for years, entirely reducing my life to a mere obstacle standing between them and my grandfather's billions. Eleanor's threats were meant to paralyze me, but they had the exact opposite effect. The moment I walked out of her house, the fear that had dictated my life for years completely vanished, replaced by a fierce, burning resolve. I drove straight to Grandfather Winston's massive estate, bypassing the security gates and walking directly into his private study. Sitting across from him, my voice remained remarkably steady as I laid out the entire, sickening truth, detailing every single piece of Eleanor's hidden involvement, her theft of my documents, and the chilling confrontation from just an hour ago. Winston listened to the entire story in absolute, heavy silence, his hands clasped tightly over his cane. But as I finished speaking, expecting shock or disbelief, I noticed that he didn't look surprised at all. Instead, a grim, knowing smile played at the corners of his mouth. He leaned back in his leather chair and revealed a shocking hidden layer to the entire situation. I already suspected financial manipulation within this family months ago, Sarah, he said softly. I knew someone was draining those accounts, which is exactly why I publicly asked that specific question at the Thanksgiving dinner table. I needed to flush the real thieves out into the open. Grandpa then explained that the $7,000 monthly checks were actually a hidden test of character written directly into a massive, conditional trust fund. He wanted to see how his heirs handled wealth and family loyalty. By systematically stealing that money, Kathy and Eleanor hadn't just committed a desperate crime, they had legally triggered a severe violation clause. With their own greedy hands, they had completely and permanently disqualified themselves from his actual inheritance, an estate worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Instead of launching a messy, public lawsuit that would violate our family privacy and drag our name through the tabloids, Grandfather Winston executed a brilliant, merciless legal maneuver. That very afternoon, he summoned both Eleanor and Kathy to his corporate headquarters. When they walked into the high-floor boardroom, expecting to negotiate or manipulate their way out of trouble, they were instead met by Winston's entire elite legal team and two private investigators standing silently by the window. Winston didn't even look up from his desk as his lead attorney slid a stack of documents across the polished table. It was an absolute ultimatum. Winston gave Eleanor and Kathy a simple, terrifying choice. They had exactly 1 hour to sign over their legal rights to all family-funded properties, return every single luxury asset purchased with the stolen funds, and sign a comprehensive, legally binding confession of their actions. If they hesitated or refused, Winston's legal team would immediately hand over the unedited identity theft, embezzlement, and wire fraud evidence to federal prosecutors. Realizing they were completely trapped, stripped of any leverage, and facing up to 15 years in a federal prison, the arrogant facades they had worn for years completely shattered. Kathy collapsed into her chair, weeping hysterically, while Eleanor's face twisted in silent defeat as she realized her grand schemes had failed entirely. With trembling hands, both Kathy and Eleanor signed the papers. They were stripped of their stolen wealth, stripped of their future security, and completely cast out of the family circle forever, left with absolutely nothing but their own greed. 3 months later, my life has completely transformed in ways I never thought possible. With the stolen funds rightfully restored to me and a secure future permanently guaranteed by Grandpa Winston's trust, I finally walked away from my 3 grueling jobs. For the first time, I can breathe without the crushing weight of survival suffocating me. Kathy's luxury penthouse was sold at a loss to pay back the estate, and she was forced to move into a cramped studio apartment. Eleanor had to downsize drastically, now living in a tiny rental, completely isolated from the extended family. They are finally living with the severe, bitter consequences of their own destructive greed. Reflecting on everything, I realized that a betrayal meant to destroy me ultimately gave me the ultimate freedom to build a life on my own terms. Now, I'm deeply curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if your own mother and sister systematically stole a life-changing inheritance right out from under you? Would you have shown them mercy, or would you have let this below? And please let me know what city you are watching this